So at first, I started to use the coiling core to mitigate some postural deficits from left to right and right to left, and also to increase some elements of my training performance. But little did I know that the more time I spend on it, the more I got out of it. So much so that it actually now is a very central theme in every movement that I'm doing. And I think you guys like it as well. So in this video, I'm gonna help you Frankenstein the coiling core into your own repertoire of movement so that you can become a beastly specimen by yielding the powerful elements of the coiling core. So what we're going to touch upon is first referring back to the coiling core mechanics so that we can incorporate some cues where some of you might had some troubles with how to establish the precise coiling core for optimal benefit. Two, we're going to expand your strength in the rotational elements of the coiling core by using elastics. Three, I'm also going to help you implement the coiling core in more traditional push-pull leg work so that you always have an idea of how you can mitigate imbalances and also see if you can incorporate some of the coiling work to expand your current training regime for better results and more effortless output. And four, I'm going to show you how you can incorporate the coiling core material into day-to-day activities so that it just becomes an all-round center point in how you operate from a physical perspective, of course. Now, before we dive into the live demo of the coiling core, I also created a assessment that helps members or clients that I work with to establish their baseline with the coiling core, but also to see if they feel more proficient on the left and right side, which is a very good way to see if there are some postural deficits as well. Now, normally I won't give this away, but today is your lucky day. If you go to the description below, you can download it. It takes around 3 minutes and it really helps you to see where you are currently at with the coiling core. It's not an assessment to say how well you do the coiling core, but it's really to help you establish where you are right now, see differences, and also to return to that assessment time and time again to see if you make progress by incorporate what we're going to show in the live demo today. So again, it's in the description below. You can download it, takes 3 minutes, and now it's time to dive into the video. So in the previous video, we went over the 4 fundamental positions of the coiling core: front side external and internal, back side external and internal. And this time around, I want to help you a bit further by understanding the mechanics and also some cueing that you can incorporate in those 4 fundamental positions to become more proficient with the left and right side coiling cores. So first, what I want you to understand that with the coiling core, there are basically 2 universal principles that you can apply in every position when you're coiling that you need to understand. The first one is that the rotation doesn't really happen from the midsection of the spine. So I'm not using this transverse plane of motion. I'm actually using a lateral bend of the spine because the spine is shaped in a way that when I'm laterally shifting, it automatically drives the hip forwards and upwards and the shoulder backwards and downwards. So what I'm actually doing is I'm using a lateral shift, which automatically creates rotation at the ends of the spine. And that is on the side that I'm coiling. What happens on the other side, so the portion that is lengthened, the shoulder is moving forwards and the hip is moving backwards. So the bending of the spine always facilitates rotation. And the second principle I want you to understand is that when coiling, we always try to keep the head above the base of support, head over foot, because this will allow us to be in the most proficient or most balanced way when we're standing or locomoting. Because if I would transition my head outwards, I'm more likely to fall. Or if I transition the head inwards, I'm also more likely to fall. So those 2 principles are very key to understand when you're coiling, which brings me to the wall. So the wall is actually a very nice stability component to utilize the coiling core. So to apply these 2 principles, you want to be with your head over the foot. And what you also want to do is you want to create this lateral bend on one side. Now, to accentuate this compression on one side and lengthening on the other side, what we can do is we can use the fingers or the hands as encoders or accentuators. How? And what I can do is I can internally rotate the hand, which leads to an internal rotation of the shoulder, which leads to more length of the lat, creating a maximal lengthening portion on this side of the body, which is leaning against the wall. Now, on the other direction or the other side, the side that is coiling, what I can do is I can use the hands to accentuate max external rotation, which brings the elbow closer to the body, which creates more contraction on the lat. So we're facilitating or using those two elements at the level of the hand to create max length and max compression. So now we're in a very good starting position with the front side external coiling core, and we're driving the knee forwards so that the center of gravity is perfectly in line with the base of support. So internal direction, creating length. I can lean against the wall, creating external direction here, and I'm driving that elbow towards the pelvis. So this is the position for the front side external coiling core. So this is what you can apply with the other 4 fundamental positions as well. Keeping the head above the base of support and using those rotations to accentuate the coiling core. Now, one final part for the external focus. So bringing the elbow backwards, what you want to focus on is that you drive the shoulder and shoulder blade toward the pelvic area. So really driving that towards the pelvic means that we're engaging the lat. When I'm initiating an internal focus, what I'm basically doing, I'm driving the elbow instead of forward, backwards and towards the sky, still creating length, but now I'm engaging more the external oblique, but I'm still keeping that rotation present. So it's more like this, engaging the external oblique, driving the elbow towards the sky, still lengthening this portion. Now, these are the cues that you can apply with the 4 fundamental positions of the previous video. But now let's use the one tool that will maximize your rotational capacity with the coiling core positions, which is a elastic band. And before we dive in, of course, I want to shout out towards David Weck and the David Weck method. He is the guy who really coined the phrase coiling core and its mechanics. And everything I've been applying for myself and for members and clients that I work with stem from the method. And I also think that these are the kinds of people that we should treasure along with other people that we'll mention in the future, because they are really trying to push the fitness industry in a more holistic way, which I am a big proponent of. But then the question becomes, why an elastic band? Well, if we take a look at what happens if we're pulling the elastic band away, what does it do? It is trying to pull back into its original shape. And because it does so, we can really utilize an elastic band to maximize contractile output by pulling the band away while it is fighting back. And this is what we're going to do with the 4 fundamental coiling core positions. So you not only get more aware of the coiling core, but you're also really strengthening that rotational capacity. So first off, if you have the band, you're going to fold it over. So we're twisting and folding it over. Then we're placing it on the wrist, on the other wrist. Then we do another circle. At least that's what I like to do. So now we have a very neat tensed band where we have to use a lot of force to pull it away, creating that max contraction, which is what we want. So first we do the front side external coiling core. So again, what we know by now is we want to create that rotation internal for the long side, external for the short side, creating a nice coil. We're trying to drive the shoulder and shoulder blade backwards to the pelvis, knee forward, head over toe, and we have the elbow in front. So here I'm creating this tension. If you feel some nice sensation and stretch around the glute, that is a good sign. And I always like to hold these positions for 10 to 15 seconds in an isometric fashion. And then I come out. Now, what you want to do is you want to stretch out the side, because you will feel how much contraction you're actually using. And then, of course, you're going to the other direction as well. Again, I'm keeping my head over foot, driving the knee forwards, creating this external internal rotation. And I'm going into a pull at the level of the shoulder and pelvis, 15 seconds. Now, what I like to do, I like to use the proficient side as a teacher for the least proficient side, because what you will notice is you have a side that you can contract a little bit more of, or the positioning is a bit better. You use that as input to make the least proficient side also more proficient to mitigate imbalances. And this is one of the things why I really love unilateral work. Now, if we then go towards the front side internal, we apply the same principles, leaning forward, but now I'm driving the elbow towards the sky and I'm creating this rotation still, head over foot. And now I'm pulling the elbow down, creating maximum contractions at the level of the external oblique, holding it 15 seconds, stretching out, going to the other direction. And again, elbow towards the sky, the other elbow towards the ground, maximum contraction at the level of the external oblique. Stretching out, that is the front side portion, external and internal direction focused. Now with the backside coiling core, what we're doing is we're taking a step away and we're now also leaning a bit more backwards, bringing around 70% of our weight on the rear foot. But again, we keep the same cues intact over here. So we now start with the external one, driving the shoulder and shoulder blade downwards, contracting, playing around with internal direction, external direction for max utilization of the coil. Going to the other side, stretching out in between sets. And then we go towards the back side internal. So now we drive the elbow in front, the other elbow towards the sky, leaning back, contracting the external oblique. Other side, leaning backwards and release. So perform these for around 15 seconds per side, per direction. Aim for 1 to 2, 3 sets, and also use all of the contractions that you just went over for your regular training sessions to increase training performance, mitigate potential deficits on the right or left side, and other elements that might come along the way. Which brings me to how you can apply it with more traditional types of training pursuits. So let's dive in. Now, let's start with a push exercise, the famous push-up, of course. In a normal push-up, what you tend to do is you keep the hands more or less pointing forwards, and then you go down, of course. Now, with the coiling core, if we look at the mechanics and we want to apply it, what we want to do is we want to sort of use the hands for encoding. So we encode the pattern from the hands. So what we are going to do is we're going to pivot the hands, creating already more of a contraction on one side and one lengthening element on the other side. So the amount of rotation of the hand can really help facilitate the coiling core in a pushing exercise. Now, it depends on your level of postural deficits or pain restrictions that you feel to see how much you incorporate it, but you can use this to amplify certain pushing, pulling, or leg work as well. So if we apply it into a pushing exercise, so instead of pointing the hands forward, I'm now driving the hand a little bit towards the outside on the side that I'm going to coil, and I'm rotating this side in. So now I'm already shifted gears into having one side more contracted, the other side more lengthened. So when I'm now pushing, you can see that the elbow is going close towards the pelvis and the other elbow is pointing away. So it almost feels a little bit like a unilateral exercise. That is actually how you want to utilize the coiling core, because it is a unilateral exercise. So you can play around with how much you do this per push-up. So that is how you can use it. For example, I've been using it, it's quite hard, with a planche push-up variant. So what I'm now doing is I'm actually creating more of a coil in the left side versus the right side to mitigate differences. So I'm slightly pivoting the long side inwards and the other side outwards. So my right arm is more proficient. Now I want to utilize more of my left arm. So what I'm currently doing with a planche push-up, for example, is using more of this coil in the total movement pattern. So that is something you can do with the pushing part. Now let's move on to the pulling element. Now, how to use the coiling core with, for example, a pulling exercise. In this case, with the pulling exercise, what we then want to do is we want to have the pulling side want to have that externally rotated, and the other one is we want to have that internally rotated. So how is that going to look like? Now, for example, what you can do is you can do a mixed scrim pull-up in which you're going to pull towards one side. And then trying, of course, this is fixed, but what you can do is you can drive the elbow a little bit upwards towards the sky, not forcefully internally rotating the shoulder. That will be a bit too excessive, but just to establish a little bit of this lengthening portion of the lat, where with the part that is coiling, you can really increase the contraction and the compression of the lat. So one more time. So that is how you can utilize coiling work in some pulling elements. And for example, if you do a row, you can do a similar thing. If you're doing a row with one arm, you place the other arm on the bench, you internally rotate it, you externally rotate the side that you're pulling on, you create that contraction on the lat, and then you pull the row like that. So those are elements how you can incorporate coiling work into your pulling pursuits that you have. Now with the legs, a very nice example that I like to implement is using the ATG split squat, but then more in a coiling fashion. So for example, if you're working on front split squats or ATG split squats, which I really love because it utilizes max range of motion on the front portion and also creates this nice hip extension on the back portion where you already work a unilateral pattern. So what you can do here, you can now externally rotate the portion on the front side for more of a coil and internally rotate the long portion. So this will be a nice coiling core front split squat variant that you can utilize. Going to the other direction, internally rotating the long side and externally rotating the short side and back and forth. So this is a very nice way to use a coiling motion with the legs, addressing the lower lat connection, increasing also some glute activation, hip internal rotation, but utilizing the coiling core to also mitigate potential deficits on the right or left side of the legs. So hopefully this gives you an idea on how to incorporate the coiling core in different elements of traditional push-pull leg work or other pursuits that you might have, but to really see, can I still develop or implement a coiling core to create less differences between the left and right side and potential restrictions and pains that you might have, and utilize more of actual performance with those traditional, more typical exercises. Now, the final part is to see how you can implement the coiling core into day-to-day activities and make it more of a fun little movement puzzle that you can implement on the get-go and make movement effortless whenever you want. So now you have a better understanding of the coiling core mechanics. You also know how to apply it with more elastic work to strengthen that rotational capacity. Plus, we went over how you could approach the coiling core in more traditional setups. But I think one of the best ways to utilize the coiling core is also to apply it in day-to-day activities. And what better way is there to apply it with one of the most foundational movements that we do, which is, of course, walking. Now, what you tend to see with people, including myself in the past, that are not yet aware of the coiling core, or at least the mechanics of the coiling core, is that they walk more or less like this. So there is potentially some rotation at the level of the thoracic region, which is often not a lot. But what you see is that there is not a lot of this lateral shift that initiates the hip and shoulder back and forth. So what we can do is we can apply the two principles that we went over, and we can really accentuate the coiling core when we're walking. So how does this look? Well, basically when you walk, what you always want to do is you want to bring the head over foot for optimal balance, or at least trying to achieve the most efficient way in relation to gravity. And then also what you want to do is you want to accentuate that coiling core. So you can laterally shift the spine when you're going to one side and then apply it to the other side. So it almost looks more like a swagger walk, which is not a bad thing, as we now know. So how I've been applying is really exaggerate the coiling core at start until it feels like an automatic movement behavior that you're doing. So I'm shifting my weight, I'm trying to coil excessively towards the other side, towards the other side, and so on and so on. So over time, it becomes just a natural pattern that you're utilizing. So this is how you can apply it with walking. And now I want to show you how you can use it with another form of movement that we do a lot, but especially to mitigate postural discrepancies. So one of the activities that we of course do a lot is sitting. But as opposed to saying that sitting is bad, what we can do is we can use sitting also as a diagnostic tool to see what kind of preferred postures we are utilizing when we're sitting, because no one is actually sitting like this the whole day. We're constantly moving and shifting into other postures. Now, what we want to do is we want to see what kind of attractors or more favorable postures we tend to move into. So a posture of what I like to sit in is I like to sit in a posture where I'm activating the right side. So I'm utilizing more of a coil on the right side. Now, if you accumulate all of those actions where you do this more, that will create some deficits. So what you want to do is whenever you sit, try to observe whether one side is more dominant than the other, and then create a counteractive coiling. Because in my case, what I could do is instead of coiling to the right, I could coil more to the left when I'm working, when I'm talking, having conversations. And then again, accumulated sitting hours over time will allow you to decrease the discrepancies of one side to the other. Because the truth is, we can use training modalities as windows of opportunities, but it's also a very nice pursuit, in my opinion, to look at the things that we do a lot from a movement perspective and try to see if we can alter its course or alter some actions that will lead to more effortless movement or more proficient movement, less pain in the future. So this was it for the video. I hope you now have a much better understanding of how the coiling core works, how you can utilize it and improve its rotational capacity, and also implementing it into more traditional ways of fitness, and also how to use it as a tool for day-to-day activities like walking and sitting to become more effortless with how you move in space. Now, if you thought this was cool, like and subscribe the video, download the assessment, and I'll see you in the next one.